I'm getting that yellow jaundice been going around, I know it. The heebie-jeebies.
It's hepatitis and you don't have it.
Sergeant Alvin Cullum York was born in 1887 in a one-room log cabin in the hills of Pall Mall, Tennessee. Barely literate, he left school after the 3rd grade to help out on the farm and work in his father's blacksmith shop. A crack shot with both pistol and rifle, he honed his marksmanship from an early age to put food on the table or win cash at local shooting contests. A heavy drinker, gambler, fighter, and all-around general hellraiser, Alvin York gave up all these in a single night. He had come home late after a good drunk and found his mother waiting up for him, worried. He was 29 years old, and she asked when he was going to be a man like your father and your grandfathers? The question hit home, and Alvin York gave up smoking, chewing, drinking, cussing, fighting, and gambling that night. When I quit all, he said. York was called to the draft in the summer of 1917. In November, he reported to his initial training at Camp Gordon, Georgia. In December, Private York was assigned to Company G, 328th Infantry Regiment of the 82nd Division. The unit arrived in France in May of 1918. After spending time in quiet sectors getting accustomed to the sights and sounds of the battlefield, the 328th was assigned to the St. Mihiel offensive, where York's unit went over the top for the first time on September 12, 1918. On the 24th, York's unit was moved to a position in reserve for the Meuse-Argonne offensive until October 7th, when they entered the line on Hill 223. On October 8, 1918, Sergeant York, a draftee from the hills of Tennessee, went out as a member of a patrol and returned a few hours later in charge of that patrol, leading a column of 132 captured German prisoners. This is a historically documented fact. In addition to capturing 132 German soldiers, York assumed command of a patrol that silenced 2 of the dominating German machine gun positions that had pinned down American forces in the valley. With the elimination of these 2 positions, the 82nd Division was able to resume the attack north and west to seize the DeKalb Railroad by the end of the day. The patrol also evacuated all the wounded, American and German. Sergeant York's actions were commensurate to, and deserving of, our nation's highest military award. This is the man. Most accounts of Sergeant York paint him as a conscientious objector who individually killed 28 German soldiers, captured 132 prisoners, and silenced 35 machine guns. In short, Sergeant York is credited with single-handedly defeating a German machine gun battalion. The notion that Alvin York was a conscientious objector who attempted to gain exemption from the military draft on moral grounds is simply not the case. In his diary, York clearly states that he was not a conscientious objector and continued to say so throughout his life. This is not to say that Alvin York, a man of great faith, did not encounter some inner moral struggle between his religious convictions and fighting for his country. Through meditation, prayer, and the counsel of his company commander, York was able to reconcile the conflict by seeing justification in fighting on the side of right. While attending initial training at Camp Gordon, Alvin York was provided an easy opportunity to leave military service honorably. York's mother, with the aid of Pastor Rosier Pyle, initiated the paperwork to exempt Alvin York from service. The exemption was claimed on the grounds that Alvin York was his mother's sole support since the passing of her husband in 1911, and that fighting went against York's religious beliefs. Accordingly, honorable discharge papers were presented to York for signature. But he refused to sign, citing duty to his country. The assertion that Sergeant York captured 35 machine guns on October 8, 1918 remains unsubstantiated. There are no official military records that indicate York brought in any captured machine guns with the patrol. While his patrol did silence 2 German machine gun emplacements, they did not maintain control of or destroy the weapons. Those machine guns left in the ravine, of unknown number, by York's patrol were recovered by retreating Germans or advancing Americans. There is little doubt that Sergeant York killed the lion's share of German soldiers in the ravine, but it is doubtful he killed them all. 7 other American soldiers in the patrol survived the initial burst of machine gun fire. They were uninjured and able to return reasonably effective fire. Some years after the fact, Sergeant Early and Corporal Cutting were both awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for their actions in the ravine. This is the myth. The events in the ravine of October 8, 1918 came and went. There was hardly time to think about it as York and the 82nd Division slugged through the Argonne for 3 weeks. In fact, a few days after the fight in the ravine, York was nearly killed during an artillery barrage while crossing an apple orchard in Sommeritz. It wasn't until after the armistice and the fighting was over that American public attention and interest began to turn toward their war heroes. Sergeant York made good copy. His "Local boy makes good" was the story Americans needed and wanted to hear. There were articles like George Petullo's "The Second Elder Gives Battle" for the Saturday Evening Post that gave Sergeant York his initial notoriety. In 1930, Tom Skehill, York's official biographer, published Sergeant York, Last of the Long Rifles. In the book, the author goes to great lengths to weave a historical link between Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett, Abraham Lincoln, and Alvin York. Then there was the Swedish newspaper article that energized the Germans to provide a painstakingly researched rebuttal. Most today, however, would associate Sergeant York's exploits with Gary Cooper, who received an Academy Award for his portrayal of Sergeant Alvin York in the 1941 war movie Sergeant York. While entertaining, the movie bears little resemblance to York's actions in the ravine. However, York's persona as portrayed by Gary Cooper was enthusiastically embraced by all. Cooper played the self-reliant frontiersman, the steadfastly loyal, humble, God-fearing American son who did his duty and beyond. This is the legend. Some 80 years after the fact, historian Major Ronald Bowman entered the ravine with an understanding of the military use of terrain and the subtle significance in the location of archaeological evidence relative to the tactics, techniques, and procedures (TTP) of the day. In his analysis of the situation, Bowman pieced all these and other factors together to develop a picture of how events could have unfolded on a foggy fall morning in 1918. The archaeological evidence includes prepared fighting positions, rolls of barbed wire, discarded ammunition cans, shell casings, a German ration spoon, and even some discarded rails from the Dekovo Railroad. The most ominous of these artifacts are the unexploded ordnance, in particular an unexploded artillery shell found near the northernmost machine gun position, fired over 80 years ago by American artillery with the aim of destroying the position. So in answer to General Lindsay's original question, "How did you do it?" Sergeant York's response, "A higher power than man," is as good as any explanation than any. Sergeant Alvin York seems to have been an ordinary man who in extraordinary circumstances rose to the occasion and became bigger than life. He was a true American hero, whose exploits, actual, mythical, and legendary, embody the spirit of the thousands of American servicemen who did their duty over there. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider giving it a like and a subscription to the channel.